Hello everyone, this is Rev Tiffany Andes, and today I'm going to speak with you about bone divination, or throwing of the bones. A little bit of history on throwing of the bones. Thrown, cast, and marked readings are inspired divinations performed by gifted psychic readers to answer life questions for their clients. In the traditions of some cultures, the bones, shells, and/or nuts that are thrown are left in their natural state. In other cultures, they may be shaped and marked, much like dice, dominoes, or the cut cowrie shells used in the Obi and the Digulum divination. In bone divination, bones of various sorts are ritually tossed onto a mat, an animal hide, or in a circle drawn in the dirt, and the resulting patterns interpreted. Throwing the bones in ancient practice, traditional to many regions of the world, including Africa, Asia, and North America. The number and type of bones employed, as well as the inclusion of other small objects such as pebbles, shells, and hard nuts, varies quite a bit from culture to culture. As a hoodoo practice, casting or throwing the bones has deep traditional roots in African culture, especially as developed among the Sangomas or divining healers of the Zulu, Swazi, Xhosa, and Ndebele traditions in southern Africa. Trained as herbalists, spirit mediums, and diviners, they fulfill an important role in their culture, equivalent to that of a root doctor in the United States or an obeah practitioner in Jamaica. The mingling of African traditions with Native American and European forms of divination has produced quite a lot of variation in hoodoo practices. Traditional items used in bone reading by Southern-style root doctors and spirit-led fortune tellers who employ these ancient methods of divination include bones, stones, coins, stalks, or shells. Additionally, some who follow this style of divining with natural curios may also perform augury by inspection of natural botanical and zoological curios such as owl pellets. Although there is no single system of bone or curio divination used by all African American practitioners, some old-timers read a set of chicken bones or possum bones and do so only on the ground rather than a tabletop, after the manner still practiced by some readers in Africa to this day. Others mix pebbles or shells or dice with their bones, as some Sangomas do, and they might read on a mat or animal hide or even on a tabletop, but no matter what the natural and man-made curios are included, the practice is still called throwing the bones. American conjure doctors and hoodoo bone readers consider it traditional to keep their divination bones in a basket, a bowl, or bag on or near their altar when not in use, and to cast them out on the mat, a hide, or a circle to read them. Each bone may have a meaning, and the patterns among the bones may be significant as well. For example, in one family tradition, 9 chicken bones are used, and each bone has a meaning. The wing bone signifies travel, the neck bone signifies poverty, and the wishbone signifies good fortune. In another family tradition, only possum bones are employed. Among the Mongolians, 4 unmarked sheep astrolagus or knuckle bones are thrown, each of which has 4 distinguishable sides, called goat, sheep, camel, and horse. Casting the 4 four-sided bones produces an array of 36 possible answers to any given question. The name for this system of divination is Shangai, which literally means ankle bone, but is often rendered in English as complicated fortune-telling. In addition to functioning as a system of divination, Shangai can also be played as a gambling game. Marked bones are often used in groups of 2 or 4 to obtain yes or no answers, as well as more detailed information. There is quite a bit of evidence to support the idea that gaming dice, often casually called the bones, may have had their origin in marked bone divination, as there are still forms of divination in which the markings of spots and dots on dice or dominoes are used to read fortunes for clients. Some readers of chicken and possum bones also mark, paint, or otherwise indicate differences between the bones for ease of reading. For example, they may wish to use 2 similar-looking bones to indicate male and female, or to call attention to certain life conditions such as love affairs, money matters, health concerns, or travel opportunities. Marking or painting the bones makes their identification quick and certain. Diviners who work with intuitive rather than mathematical systems of bone reading may create their own reading methods, drawing from a combination of established historical methods and personal inspiration. While some of these methods may resemble traditional African Sangoma-style readings, they are not Sangoma readings, which are rooted in Zulu tradition. Rather, these contemporary bone reading styles are based on the individual diviner's personal understanding of spirit and symbolism. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about my style of bone reading. This is something that I came upon when I was looking for different divination methods. First, I started just reading bones by themselves, and then I ran into a curio system, which uses bones and shells and nuts and other forms of items that go into a curio set. What you see before me is a circle. So, like I read in the readings, you can have a mat, you can have a hide, you can actually draw a circle in the dirt, or you can read on top of a blank table if you want, or just the ground. I prefer to use an actual mat. When you get your curio set, or when you get your bone set, you want to do something that's called smoking the bones. This is to pay homage to your ancestors, the spirits, and just to give respect to the bones themselves before you actually do a reading with them. So I like to use Palo Santo incense, but you can use regular incense, you can use stick incense, you can use Palo Santo in wooden style, or any other incense that you might have. You just light it, and then you gently blow the smoke over the pieces. So I talked a little bit about how the bones are traditionally kept in baskets or bags. I like to keep mine in a little basket. So I'll gather the pieces and put them back in my basket, especially if I'm going to be doing readings. If I happen to be traveling with my bones, I actually have a nylon bag that I keep them in, with a smaller bag that's inside to keep the pieces in, like this. I also fold up my mat, and my mat fits perfectly in my travel bag too. I also keep mugwort in my bag to bless the pieces with. So, when you do a throwing of the bones or a casting of the bones, you shake the basket. I call upon my spirits and my ancestors, and I thank them for any wisdom that's going to come through the pieces. And I also blow on the pieces as I'm shaking them. Ask for whatever wisdom that the pieces are going to impart, and then I toss them. So, some pieces are going to actually roll off the mat, and they are not going to actually take part of the reading themselves. So I will gather those pieces up, and I will put them back in my basket. So as you look at the circle itself, those things that are moving away from you are things that are coming along in the future. Those things that are closest to you are things that are most prominent in the present. I have this bracelet right here, which when it's cast is something that everything that falls within that bracelet are things that are most prominent for the right now that you should pay attention to. There are a couple pieces you'll see, like the coyote finger bone or the knuckle bone. There's a pearl in here, there's a feather, and there's this badger claw, which is representative of a female. So those are the pieces that I would read if this was an actual reading. Those were the pieces that I would read first. There's also this piece right here, which fell off of the side. This represents the querent. That's always the next piece that I pay attention to. And since it fell off to the side of the actual board itself, in that reading, when that happens, it means that the querent is feeling separated from their fortune, or separated from what is happening, the events happening in their life right now. Almost like they're watching a movie, they're feeling disassociated from their fortune. These pieces right here, since they fell out of the circle, don't matter, so I will put them back in the basket. So we have several other pieces that we're going to pay attention to, all of them really close to this gathering of pieces right here. We have the Marie Laveau emblem, or the necklace piece. That is representative of health and wellness. We've got this piece right here, which is reminiscent of death. We have this piece right here that, if you see on the one side, it's got some Asian designs painted onto it. That's actually reminiscent of luck, but since it's turned over, this person would actually be having bad luck at the moment. The turtle represents time, and it's specifically like slowing down of time. This is an air stone. So we have 4 stones that represent the 4 elements that are in the curio set. So we have an air stone, a fire stone, an earth stone, and we have water stone as well. Water stone fell outside the circle, so we put it back in the basket. This piece represents anything that you really should pay attention to. It points to these things, and right now it's pointing to the key, which represents opportunities. We also have the scissors, which represents cutting things out of your life, and that is touching this tiny little coin, which represents values. We have the home and life medallion right here. We also have the angel right here, which represents messages from the other side, and those spirits that are those friendly spirits that look over your shoulder. The feather also represents messages, but those are direct messages from like your ancestors and things that you actually should be paying attention to, but you might not be paying attention to. The little pearl that's in here, which I'll lift it up really quick, that represents a baby or a child or a childlike energy. The coyote knucklebone represents deceit, or somebody who might be deceiving you. This piece represents money. This piece actually represents a male energy in your life. This piece is interesting because it's painted white. It's a cow bone. It's painted white on one side and black on the other, and it represents lessons. The black side represents life lessons that are not karmic in nature, lessons that are just basically just things that you run into on a day-to-day basis. The white side represents karmic-based lessons. The ring represents relationships. We have a couple more pieces. So I would, if this was an actual reading, I would be concentrating a lot on this particular grouping of items and how those represented what's going on in the person's life right now. And then I would focus on this particular grouping right here, since it seems to also be kind of grouped together closely. And in between, you kind of have this lofty group that's moving in between the two. I would kind of focus on that one as well. So in between, you've got the fire stone, you have the earth stone, you have this hand, which represents sickness. You have the dice, which is currently on the number 6, which represents matters of the heart. You have this piece, which represents daily affirmations. And over here, you have the buffalo tooth, which represents family. You have this piece, which represents dark energies in your life. You have the goddess piece, which represents feminine energies. You have the cross, which represents sacrifices. And you have the hagstone, which represents resources that are available to you. Some of these other pieces, like the heart and the skull, the bicycle, and the scorpion, aren't necessarily connected to any of the other groupings, and they aren't really speaking in this particular reading, even though they're within the circle, but they're not necessarily loud enough to talk, if that makes sense. So in this case, we wouldn't necessarily include them in the reading. Now, when I do a reading for somebody, I always ask them to do the breathing on the bones unless I'm doing the reading for myself. But like we did the breath before we threw the bones. If I was doing a reading for someone, I would have them breathe on the bones, and then I would throw the bones. At this point, I would ask for any clarifying questions that they had. So I would actually start. I would do the reading. I would talk about the different clumps of pieces. I would go through and actually explain the meaning of each of the pieces. I would give a little bit of clarification, or like I would discuss kind of how the relationship of the pieces to each other actually means anything in their lives, or the relationships of things going on right now. And then I would ask them for clarifying questions that they have, if they had any clarifying questions. And then the reading would be done. I always tell the people that I don't necessarily remember how the pieces fall or anything about the reading once it's clean, once the table has been cleaned. And so I can't go back and actually be like, oh yeah, well that's what that meant next to this piece or something else, because I don't actually remember what those look like once the pieces have been cleaned off the cloth. So if anybody has any questions about what it is we've talked about today, how the reading is done, the cloth itself, we can talk about where you can get your curio set. A lot of these pieces are naturally based. As you see, they're bones. This one's a buffalo tooth, this one's a coyote knuckle. I got my first curio set from Etsy. So it came with 13 pieces. As you can see, there are many more than 13 pieces here. I added other pieces to the set as they naturally progressed. So for instance, this ring, which represents relationships, called to me when I was cleaning out my closet, and it actually said, I want to be in your curio set. So I collected the piece and I added it to my curio set. I've had other people add pieces because they thought that they would help me, and other friends who have, suggested pieces. Some pieces didn't talk to the rest of the pieces, or they didn't read very well, and so I didn't include them. And then other pieces really did talk very well once I added them to the set itself. And that's essentially, it's a moving and a living endeavor. And I read my bones pretty much multiple times a week, just to keep on top of the art of it. But also to see if any of the pieces fall out of the curio set from being functional. If they aren't speaking to me anymore, or if they don't want to work anymore, then I take them out of the set. If something else wants to add itself to the curio set, then I add it to the curio set. And that's kind of how this works, is it's all on the diviner, and basically what the diviner deems to be appropriate for the set itself. But yes, if anybody has any questions about the set itself, about the cloth, the basket, the actual methodology of the readings, I'm happy to answer those. I love doing this, and so I'm really happy that I've had the opportunity to share this with you. And that's basically it. So happy Samhain.
Hi friends, happy Samhain. My name is Florence Edwards Miller, and I'm here today to teach you about Tasseomancy, or reading the tea leaves. You might have seen someone read tea leaves in a movie, or read about it in a fiction book. Harry Potter comes to mind. But tea leaf reading is not a very ubiquitous form of divination today, and I think that's a shame, because it's easy and really accessible. If you can use your imagination and be intuitive, and you can drink a cup of tea, then you can read tea leaves. Before we get to pouring, let's do just a tiny bit of history of tea and Tasseomancy. Tea, of course, comes from Asia, It spread to Europe, where it really took off. Tea culture was and is ubiquitous in England and much of Western Europe. And back in the 17th and 18th centuries, you'd have people taking tea across all classes daily. Like many forms of divination, tea leaf reading was divination with something that you had right in front of you. Tarot came from playing cards. Everyone had playing cards. Reading bones or entrails came from livestock, back when everyone had livestock. When everyone had tea leaves, that's what they read. Probably the precursor to reading tea leaves was actually reading coffee grounds. That might have come out of the Middle East, but we don't have great documentation on that. We don't have great documentation about when and where tea leaf reading started either, but it probably started in the fairly early modern period and took off right in the Victorian period. As you probably know, the Victorian period was a time when a lot of occult or metaphysical activities got popular. By the time we get to the 1920s, it's trite by this point. This is where we see tea leaf readings in a lot of media, and it's becoming a mass market good. So much so that they even started making fancy tea leaf reading cups just for that purpose. This is my Melrose Cup of Fortune, which has symbols all over it. Kind of reminds me of the alethiometer from the Golden Compass. And it comes from probably 1910 through early 1920. You can get a more recent version, which I sometimes like to use as candle holder. That was a reproduction. There were a lot of these on the market that were sold in Barnes & Noble a few years back. But you don't need anything special to read tea leaves. All you need to do Tasseomancy are a cup, some loose leaf tea, hot water, and a saucer and napkin are very helpful. When picking a cup, what you want to be looking for is something that is teacup shaped, so sort of scooped. Unfortunately, you can't read tea leaves in something like a coffee mug that has squared off walls to the floor. You need a more gently scooping base. Let's talk a little bit about the type of tea to use. You don't have to be too picky, but there's a few things that you want to avoid. First, if you rip open a commercial tea bag, that's probably not going to work because the tea there has generally been reduced to a powder. What you're looking for is what's called a loose leaf tea. Secondly, you can't easily read in a loose leaf blend that has a lot of really big chunks in it. So nothing that's just buds or some of the pearl cinches just don't work as well. But what you can read is in any loose leaf tea, including teas that don't have actual tea plant at all, or tisane, so herbal tea. I have here 3 of my current favorite teas to take a look at. This is a green tea. It's a basic sencha. As you can see, a lot of little fibers in there. I got this from Matcha Tea Company here in Madison. Or you can read with a specialty tea. This is a Halloween tea from Simplicity Teas. I have a monthly subscription from them. They're wonderful. And you can see it's got these little extra chunks, and those can provide a little bit of interest during the reading. Just as long as they're not the whole cup, they're fine to have some little fun bits in there. And finally, this is the tea that we're going to use today. This is a tisane that comes from Asheville, Raven and Crone, lovely shop, and this is their Divination tea blend, so I thought it was very apt. It contains mugwort, great herb for divination, lavender, skullcap, rose, spearmint, herba ursi, and kava kava. As you can see here, there are some little fun bits, twigs, flowers, but the majority of it are these smaller leaves that will make for a great reading. So once you have your teacup, your tea, and your water, the procedure is fairly simple. Take the tea and put it loose into the cup. You're not going to use a tea ball or strainer or anything. Yes, this does make drinking it just a little bit challenging. Pour your water in, fill up the cup, and let the loose tea steep within the cup. As the tea steeps, this is a great moment for you to concentrate on your question or intention. If you're reading for someone else, you get them to do it. Inhale the steam, think about your question, open yourself to the divine. Once you have your question, then it's time to drink the tea. Again, because this is loose leaf tea floating in the water, you're going to need to do a little bit of straining with your teeth. You might need some floss afterwards. To your health. I'm going to fast forward this a little bit since you've got better things to do with your Samhain than sit and watch me enjoy a cup of tea. But I do urge you, when you do this on your own, if you can, don't chug it. Enjoy the tea, focus on your intention, keep yourself open to the divine. As I get down to the very end, I start to take much smaller sips because I want to make sure to leave just the right amount of liquid at the bottom of my cup. You need to have just enough water left to be able to slosh and swirl the remaining tea leaves around the cup, but not too much so that you slosh them out of the cup or it gets truly sloppy. Now, this is the fun part, and I'm going to demonstrate on a dry cup first. What you're going to want to do is take your cup, take it by the rim, and start turning it so that you swirl the tea leaves all around. You want to get them up, get the water almost as close to the brim as you can without sloshing it out. And when you're ready, when you've got it good and swirled, you take it and turn it over into your saucer. That is where the napkin comes into play. You have the napkin there to catch the remaining water and a little bit of the leaves, and leaving the rest of your cup fairly dry for you to read. The way I read tea leaves, and you read 3 different books, you're going to get 3 different definitions, so please feel free to make up your own. I look at 2 axes when assessing where the tea leaf formations are. How far down into the cup formation is, and where along the circle of the cup is. I always start that circle with my cup, with the handle facing 12 o'clock. And I think of the circle as talking about time. Those things which are nearer at hand are going to be earlier in the clock face of the cup. So something over here, relatively soon, something over here, relatively far. How far? Depends on your reading. You might be doing a reading where a few months is more pertinent, or maybe a few years. The depth of the cup tells me where in the querent's psyche the issue is lying. Those things that are at the top are the most top of mind. Halfway down the cup, I think of that as being mainly the emotional realm, while those leaves that have settled to the bottom talk to me about what are the deepest values, needs, fears, and often the unconscious motivations going into the querent in the cup. As you look at your cup, the first thing, take a breath, connect with the divine, connect with your intuition. When you first look at your cup, you're going to want to focus on the big picture, literally the big clumps or chunks. Look at the various tea shapes made out of the leaves, blossoms, whatever's in your cup, in order of size. Whatever's biggest is going to be most important. This is the part where you use your imagination and your intuition, just like when you were a kid looking up at cloud shapes. You take a look at the shapes and don't self-censor. What's the first thing that leaps to your mind? When I look at this cup, my largest shape is a clump here, up near the rim at about 1:30, 2 o'clock. It's got a big rose petal in it. I am seeing actually here kind of a spirit, or you could even say angelic figure, maybe with a helmet, so kind of a warrior angel type, looking down into the cup. Now, because it's made of a rose petal, I'm going to put my interpretation of rose onto that and see that this is a figure of compassion, beauty, maybe love, but also strength, because I'm seeing it helmed and armored. Not quite sure what that means yet, but the rest of the cup may give me a little bit more connotation. Moving over, there's a little clump that's right up at the top that looks to me a lot like a little bat. I can see some long ears, sort of hunch-shaped like our little North American bats, and which reminds me of a few things. These days, a lot of the bats around here are beginning to do their hibernation. So that might talk a little bit about the hibernation, could be about being nocturnal, or also this type of year, a lot of the bats are actually pregnant. A lot of female bats just stayed over the winter and give birth in their hibernaculums. So maybe this is about an opportunity gestating. Bats are sometimes associated with luck, so that could be there. Moving around. Got a few smaller formations here. This one looks to me like a diving seabird. One of those birds that dives into the water and catches fish from seeing them from up above. So for me, that's seeming like an opportunity that one could seize, being keen-eyed and going for it when the opportunity arises. And finally, I've got a little formation, one of which actually looks like a flying bat as well. And above it, we've got a few other figures, including something that looks a heck of a lot like a llama or alpaca. Llama can mean, because of the rhyme, drama. And so that's close to mind too. So now that I've gone through this cup and taken a look at all the major patterns, I'm going to try and put them together a little bit. All of these are up on the surface here. So I would say the querent is dealing with, frankly, a lot on their minds. We're not talking about deep personal issues of great angst and life-changing import. If we did, then we'd have a lot more leaves on the bottom. But what we're dealing with here is a whole series of symbols that are near the surface of the mind and the surface of the emotions. So now that I've gone through and I've let my intuition just free associate on all of these little shapes, I can go back and start to tell a story with them. My first figure that I looked at, the biggest one, is a contradictory figure with both softness and compassion and also strength. I would say that this might be calling on the querent. One thing that's close to their mind would be perhaps either the need to be both strong and compassionate to those around you, or feeling that you might be falling short on that. This figure seems to be winged, which might be that you need to call upon the divine or your formation thereof to give you that softness and strength that's going to be necessary to get you through the things that are coming up shortly. A little while after that, we get the bat. It's not a flying bat, it's a crawling bat, which, like I said, makes me think that it's a bat that's starting to hibernate. So this could be a call for you to slow down, take things easy, and figure out what you can gestate in a quieter and more limited time to come. The winter is harsh, but if you snuggle down with your friends, stay warm, and conserve your resources, you could have something marvelous come springtime. Moving around quite a bit, we get to the formation which had the diving bird. This is a little bit more further down, so this is probably not an opportunity this might be an opportunity that is more about the heart than the head. And going forward, I would say if we're looking at this cup as being a year, this would probably be in the spring. The diving bird would suggest the need to seize an opportunity when you see it. Keep a sharp lookout and go for it. Again, this is probably an opportunity that will satisfy your heart. It could be a new relationship. It could be a new life change that's really going to serve you best. But look for it because it's not just going to come to you. Finally, because we've got this tiny little llama symbol, that's right near the top of the cup, I would say don't get involved with the drama. See it for what it is, find the humor in the dramatic situation, and be ready to spread your wings, little bat, and start to soar past it. Remember that your reading is your own. Trust your intuition, trust your instincts. Happy reading and happy Samhain.
Hi, Circle Sanctuary, Blessed Samhain. My name is Amanda Marilyn. I am broadcasting to you from the West Coast, San Diego, California. It's really good to be here today. I have been attending Circle Sanctuary since I was a kid, so I really appreciate that I get to come back and share my passion and knowledge of the tarot with you. I'm waving hello to old friends, saying hi to new friends. I've been reading tarot for about the past 20 years. I picked up my first deck when I was working at Spencer's Gifts, and it was a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And I'd like to bring attention to that Smith at the end because that's for Pamela Cole Smith, and she was the illustrator of the Rider-Waite deck. And she doesn't often get credit when we refer to that deck. And so all hail our ancestor Pamela Smith this Samhain. So what I'm going to get into today is a very brief introduction into the history and backbone of the symbolism of the tarot. And I don't have enough time to give it real justice and get into more than that as far as traditional tarot goes. But I do want to give you a chance to step into your own wise self get in touch with your intuition, and be able to pick up a deck of cards, no matter where you are in your tarot journey. If you're just getting started today, if you've been doing this for years, and having a sense of ability and confidence in being able to have a relationship with the cards. So that being said, let's jump in. So the tarot cards date back to 14th century Italy, as far as historians can tell, when they had the addition of the major arcana cards for the purpose of them being trump cards, or cards to play in trick-taking games. Example of a trick-taking game would be spades or bridge. And so they started there, for the purpose of a continuation of games, right? And actually a popular version of that in France, which you can still look up the instructions for and play, it's kind of fun, is tarot. And so, where does the divination and cartomancy aspect come in? Well, really specifically for the tarot cards, because we know that, or we at least suspect that divination and cartomancy, with cards has been going on for a long time in many parts of the world, but in different forms than this one specifically. And this one specifically being the 56 minor arcana and the 22 major arcana. And so about the 18th century, Hermetic groups, put in a lot of their symbology and gave meaning to some of the cards in the way of divinatory meanings, which is how we have the cards presented to us today in many forms. And so let's jump in. I mentioned that there are 56 minor arcana, also known as pit cards, and 22 major arcana. So let's talk about those 22 major arcana cards. They start with the Fool at 0 and go all the way up to the World at 21. And when you have that Fool card, he's, kind of jumping off to the abyss, whether he realizes it or not. And he's got his knapsack, he's got his tools on his bag, and he's ready to go, though it may seem foolish, he may seem unprepared. He actually has everything that he needs. And this is a representation of, the life path journey, from the Fool through many different archetypes all the way up through the World. And it's interesting, too, that the Fool starts with the 0. And the 0 is also the circle, which makes that complete circle, right? It makes that full completion, from the Fool to the World, back to the Fool again. So after he's learned everything there is to learn about where he was on the path, he's ready to learn more, right? And so I think of these cards as being big, overarching, kind of lessons in your life. These are the chapters in your book. These are the overall themes of what is happening to you right now. And then when I think of the minor arcana cards, I think of those as more of your daily, kind of earthly life and what is happening to you down here. The interactions you have with other people, the joys that you come across, the fears, your hopes, your dreams. It's your day-to-day existence that's coming out at you with the minor arcana cards. And those minor arcana cards consist of Ace through 10, and then you have Pages, Knights, Queens, and Kings. Though depending on which deck and which author you have, you might have, instead of the Page and Knight, you might have Prince and Princess. There's different, iterations of those things, but it basically boils down to the same thing. Your Ace being the spark, the beginning, right? And your 10 sometimes being overwhelm, sometimes being completion. It's all of the above before you cycle back. So it's almost like a microcosm of the macrocosm, right? So The minor arcana are like the microcosm of the major arcana, which you can think of as the macrocosm. And so those cards, the minor arcana, come in 4 suites. And this might be, relatively familiar with you. In paganism, we're used to dealing with 4 elements, right? We've got fire, water, air, and earth, right? And those actually relate to the suites in the deck. And so we start with air, with the swords cards. And air represents, intellect, education. It represents the mind and your thoughts. Then you move along and you get down to the wands, which represent fire. And that's your creativity, that's your passion, that's your drive. That's your sensuality, that's your sexuality, that's whatever lights a fire within you. And then you move along the wheel and you're into the water position, right, with the cups. And so your cups are your emotions. It's that tide of feelings that goes in and out and, is kind of beyond your control, right? But it's also a reflection of your relationships and how things change. And then moving again, you move into the earth element, which is pentacles or coins. And those are relating to things like money, prosperity, job, your home, your family life, those very, kind of like concrete, get her done type of things, right? I want to make note too that depending on who you're talking to or different traditions, sometimes the swords and the wands are switched, but for simplicity I just wanted to give you the way that I normally read. Though I would like to say that there are many ways to read the tarot and all of them are valid in their own right. And so with that being said, now that you've got a little background on the tarot, I'd like to step into how to give a reading. So for the purpose of this reading, feel free to take part in the message if you think it's meant for you, or you can leave it behind and just see what you can get from the lesson. So I'm taking a moment to shuffle the cards. I like to think about and consult with the client on, what question they would like answered and how to phrase that question. Because when you can phrase a question well, you can hopefully get a good answer. But for the purposes of today, let's just go with, what does the universe want me to know? I'm going to use a 3-card spread. And there's different ways to look at this 3-card spread. I like to put the first card in the middle, put the second to the left, and the third to the right. And I'll hold these up for you in a minute so you can see what they are. But this can be read a number of ways. And the first thing I think about when I am giving a reading is that really what I'm doing is I'm telling a story. I'm telling a story that's presented to me. So when you're looking at these cards, you're looking for that spark of a story. And the different ways you could kind of read that story are kind of the ones you may be familiar with already, which is to the left, past, center card, present, and to the right, the future. Or a way that Patricia showed me that I really love is the center card being the theme, to the left being the problem or issue, and to the right being the solution. Another way that I look at these cards when they come through is just that they're giving me a message. There's not necessarily any order to the thing. So it really depends on what is coming through you. I had a good friend of mine talk about intuition once as a set of patterns that your body is recognizing, but maybe your mind hasn't recognized that yet. So I want you to think about that when you get involved with the cards, is that you do have this knowledge and info within you, and that you can trust what you're feeling, what's coming through you. And like going to the gym, it's a muscle that needs to be worked out and developed, but it's something that you have access to. So without further ado, let's jump in. Very nice. The center card I have is the Star. To the left, we have the Queen of Wands. And to the right, we have the King of Swords. So, the first thing that I'm drawn to here, the Star card, is that she's dipping her foot in the water. She's got the moon behind her. She's pouring out back into this body of water. And I feel like the first thing I do is I try and see what sensation I'm feeling in my body and how can that relate to this card that's coming through. And the sensation I feel is peace and calm. And when I think about when I go to the water and how relaxed I am. And so that's what's coming through. That's the beginning of this story. I think about how quiet, you know, it looks over here, that there aren't any other distractions, that she's taking time to herself. And I'm reminded of, you know, how much we are bombarded with technology, with everything during our day, and how it's hard to take that moment and get a moment to yourself. So I think there's a message there about relaxing and being where you are. And if you're sitting here watching this video today with me, to relax into this moment and not be thinking about, you know, what you're making for dinner or when you're going to pick the kids up or, you know, who's taking out the dog later. You know, it's a slowing down. It's calming. And it's interesting that this is the card I get here in the center if we're thinking about theme, right? The theme of the deck. Because the problem to the left is how I'm reading this today would be the Queen of Wands. And here again is why I'm saying I'm going more with intuition than necessarily the original message or the symbology. And the beauty in this is that, you know, every time you pick up these cards, it doesn't matter, you know, if you've read with this deck a bunch of times before, they're gonna relate different things to you in that moment. They're gonna mean different things for the different reader that you're working with if you're including your intuition. And, you know, the first thing I see is a fire in the background, and, you know, that's been, whew, boy, has that been difficult on the West Coast, let me tell you, with friends and everything. And I see her here, and she's in front of the fire. And so I see that the fire is behind her, but you could see with her face that she looks very frazzled. And so she's holding this wand and she's trying to keep things under control. But I think that might be, and where do I feel that in my body? I feel it in my chest. I feel that tension. I feel that, you know, kind of pressure of the stressors of life that are coming through. And I wanna make it better, right? That's the feeling I'm getting from this person, is that she wants to make it better. But what she's not realizing is she's okay. She's not in danger of this fire over here. She's sitting on her throne. She's got her little cat in the background and who cares for her. I think there's a sense of wanting to put down the need to control the situation, put down the need to try and fix everything, especially big things that are out of our control. We've got a lot of major things going on in life right now that, you know, that maybe you can't personally fix, but you can take the time to yourself and come across and like step into the Star card. You can find where your peace lies. You can make a difference in your own life, right? And that's kind of like a bigger lesson here too around control, right? Is that you really are only in control of yourself and your actions and your responses to situations. Moving forward, solution, right? Theme, problem, solution, or past, present, future, right? We have the King of Swords. And so I see this King of Swords, I see clear skies above him. Remember I talked about swords being about intellect and thought. You know, with this guy being the king, you know, he really knows his business here. He really is taking the time to like feel out his inner wisdom before he takes further steps. I like to notice that he's still on his throne, so he hasn't progressed yet. He hasn't made his next move. But the skies are clear behind him. There's a new dawn rising. And he's very grounded here, you know, his feet on these rocks. And so, as you can see, I've kind of taken my time to, you know, pay attention to what's happening in the card, pay attention to what story comes to my mind. What story comes to your mind could be different, but that's the beauty, and when you're the one giving the reading, and connecting to your wise self and knowing that you have this knowledge. And I think one of the hardest breakthroughs is of joining, you know, the league of, you know, becoming a tarot reader, you know, and I say that, you know, with the least amount of pressure possible. I'm not saying a professional reader, I'm saying, you know, what does it take for you to sit down with these cards and have a moment with them? And, you know, and that the biggest breakthrough for that is like being able to be like, you know, I have wisdom, I have knowledge, you know, the spark of what is coming to me, it means something and I'm going to go with it. You know, even if I stumble over it. You know, some of these things have come pretty naturally to me because I've been doing this for a while, but when I first started, I'd have to sit there and I'm like, okay, there's a woman in this water and she's sitting there and she's pouring this thing out, and what the heck does this have to do with my life? But, you know, give it time, you know, like start speaking out what you're seeing in front of you if you have to, and that'll help you to start putting the words, and soon a picture will emerge. And so to finish this out, so he's sitting there and he's pondering and he's looking ahead and he's got his sword and he's got the knowledge, and I think that relates to you. I think that relates to your knowledge and your ability to move forward, but maybe needing to think about it a little bit more. Maybe now is not the time for whatever action you're going to take to make a decision. You know, it's the time to acknowledge that you have the inner wisdom to make the choices moving forward, and that you know that you're going to make the right choice when the time comes, and you're a wise person and a wise self who's going to be able to get up off that throne and take that action. And so, in brief, I've kind of touched upon, you know, how to look at the cards, how to get familiar, how to feel out and find things in the art and find what moves you, and knowing that you have what it takes inside of you to read. And if you have any questions, you know, feel free to reach out. I'll be in the comments bar for a little bit. And before we close, you know, I always think it's important to, you know, thank the spirits, thank the guides that came here today. And, you know, if you're working with someone else, besides, you know, reading for yourself, it's good to cut that cord. It's good to say. Thank you so much, Circle Sanctuary. Bye.